Hello, and welcome to this deep dive analysis. Today, we are turning our attention to the center of American political power, Pennsylvania Avenue. Usually, when we look at the White House, we are looking for policy updates, diplomatic announcements, or legislative strategies. But right now, if you were to stand outside the gates of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, you would see something very different. You would see cranes. You would hear the grinding of heavy machinery. You would see the physical dismantling of history. What we are witnessing is a construction project that has reportedly spiraled into a state of chaotic paralysis. It is a story that goes far beyond bricks and mortar. It is a narrative about management style, the rejection of expertise, and the costly consequences of impulse. We are looking at a demolition and construction effort that has hit a humiliating standstill, and to understand why, we have to peel back the layers of what was planned, what went wrong, and what this tells us about Donald Trump's approach to execution. Let's start with the facts on the ground. Reports confirm that parts of the White House complex have been demolished. This isn't a minor renovation or a touch-up of the paint. This is heavy industrial work. Witnesses in Washington, D.C. have observed cranes operating day and night, even as late as 10 p.m., moving materials and tearing down existing structures. When you see heavy equipment running under floodlights late at night, it usually suggests an urgent, well-coordinated push toward a deadline. However, in this case, it appears to be the prelude to a standstill. The objective was massive. The plan was to construct a ballroom. But describing it simply as a ballroom does a disservice to the sheer scale of the ambition here. We are talking about a proposed structure costing upwards of $300 million. But the cost is secondary to the physical footprint. The proposed size for this new addition was approximately 90,000 square feet. To put that number into perspective, we need to look at the existing White House. The main residence, the iconic building that everyone recognizes, is roughly 55,000 square feet. Donald Trump's plan was to build an addition that was nearly double the size of the original historic mansion itself. This brings us to the core of the conflict, and it is where the story shifts from a construction update to a crisis of leadership and expertise. The project has ground to a halt because of a fundamental clash between the client's desires and architectural reality. The architect originally selected by Donald Trump for this monumental task was James McCrae II. McCrae is a professional who understands the delicate balance required when modifying a historic landmark. When presented with the demand for a 90,000 square foot facility, the architect reportedly pushed back. Now, let's pause for a moment to analyze the concept of architectural integrity and scale. In the world of high-stakes architecture, specifically when dealing with heritage sites, there is a golden rule. The extension should never overshadow the original. The new structure is meant to complement, support, and serve the main building, not swallow it whole. When you propose an annex that is significantly larger than the primary residence, you are violating the visual and structural hierarchy of the site. It creates a dissonance that isn't just aesthetically displeasing, it is functionally illogical. McCrae reportedly warned Donald Trump that this plan was not feasible. He argued that it wouldn't work, that it was too big, too imposing, and practically impossible to integrate into the existing layout without ruining the character of the White House. This is where the friction point lies. You have a subject matter expert providing a technical and aesthetic reality check, and you have a client who is fixated on size and grandeur above all else. This dynamic leads us to a psychological element that observers often note regarding Donald Trump's real estate history. There is a consistent pattern of equating size with success. The drive to build the biggest, the tallest, or the most expensive structure often supersedes practical considerations like utility, context, or design harmony. Whether this stems from a need to project dominance or a desire to leave a visible legacy, The result in this case is a clash with the laws of physics and design. So, what happens when an expert tells Donald Trump no? Based on the reports we have, the result was inevitable. James McCraw II is out. The architect who tried to apply the brakes to an ill-conceived plan has parted ways with the project. This leaves the site in a precarious position. The demolition has already happened. The historic fabric has been torn into. But there is no viable plan for what comes next, because the original vision was deemed unbuildable by the very person hired to design it. The White House is now reportedly scrambling to find a replacement. They are looking into other firms, with the DC-based architecture firm Shalom Baranis being mentioned as a potential successor to take over this mess. But think about the position this new firm is in. They are being asked to step into a project where the ground is already broken, the previous architect has left due to creative and practical differences, and the client is demanding the impossible. This brings us to the old adage, measure twice, cut once. It is a cliché for a reason. It encapsulates the wisdom of planning. You ensure your blueprints are solid, your engineering is sound, and your logistics are in place before you ever pick up a hammer. Or in this case, a wrecking ball. Here, that logic was inverted. The demolition began on impulse. The destruction was prioritized over the planning. Let's analyze the financial implications of this shoot first, aim later approach. In the construction industry, a standstill is incredibly expensive. When a site goes dormant, you are not just saving money on labor. You are often paying rental fees on idle cranes and heavy machinery. You are paying for security to watch a hole in the ground. You are dealing with inflation on materials the longer you wait. The estimated cost was already hovering over $300 million. With delays, change orders, and the onboarding of new architectural teams, that number is virtually guaranteed to skyrocket. This is how budgets balloon out of control. It isn't usually corruption, it's incompetence and poor project management. Now you might be asking yourself, why does this matter? It's just a building. And that is a fair question. But investigative analysis requires us to look at this project as a microcosm. This ballroom is a symbol. It encapsulates the chaotic nature that critics argue defines Donald Trump's entire professional and political career. The sequence of events here, tearing down a landmark on impulse, ignoring the advice of hired experts, and then firing those experts when they refuse to execute a bad idea, is a recurring theme. It challenges the central narrative that Donald Trump has cultivated for decades, the myth of the master builder. Donald Trump has always leveraged his background in real estate as his primary qualification for the presidency. The argument is simple. I built skyscrapers, I managed empires, I know how to get things done, and therefore I can run the country. But when we look at the evidence, does that claim hold water? There is a fascinating economic comparison that is often cited by financial analysts regarding Trump's wealth. It involves the S&P 500. For those who might not be familiar with the term, the S&P 500 is a stock market index that tracks the performance of 500 of the largest companies listed on stock exchanges in the United States. It is considered a benchmark for the overall economy. Investing in an S&P 500 index fund is considered passive investing. You put your money in, you leave it alone, and you let the market do the work. Analysis has shown that if Donald Trump had simply taken the wealth he inherited from his father and placed it into a standard S&P 500 index fund, if he had done absolutely nothing, built nothing, and negotiated nothing, he would likely be wealthier today than he is after decades of active wheeling and dealing. This is a devastating data point. It suggests that his business acumen, the risk-taking, the building, the branding, actually destroyed value rather than created it. He underperformed the basic market average. When you combine that financial reality with the operational reality we are seeing at the White House, the picture becomes clear. We see a history of projects that go over budget. We see a history of lawsuits, bankruptcies, and contractors not getting paid. And now we see a ballroom project that is physically impossible to build, sitting as a pile of debris in the center of the nation's capital. This situation at the White House serves as a physical manifestation of a management style that relies on bluster rather than blueprints. It suggests that the skills Donald Trump claims to possess, organization, execution, foresight, are missing when it matters most. The tragedy here is not just the wasted money, though hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars is certainly a major concern. The tragedy is the destruction of heritage without a plan for restoration. It is the visual reminder that when you ignore expertise and proceed based on ego, you are left with a mess that others have to clean up. As the search for a new architect continues, and as the cranes sit idle over a partially demolished White House, we are left to wonder, is this just a failed construction project, or is it the perfect metaphor for a specific brand of leadership? The evidence suggests the latter. It is a pattern of chaos, cost overruns, and unfinished business that has followed Donald Trump from the private sector to the most public house in America. Thank you for joining me for this analysis. We will continue to monitor the situation at the White House and bring you updates as this architectural saga unfolds.